So I would like to control where we're going in this conversation right now about control issues.
Seems fair.
That's why I have gathered us here today, is to talk about control issues. Okay?
Yes, ma'am.
So when we are working on bringing projects to life, from an idea, the seed of an idea, to a sketch, to beta testing, to getting something fulfilled, to getting funding for it, there is so many aspects of bringing a project, an idea to life. And as the people who are responsible for bringing said things to life, sometimes we can get ourselves caught in control issues. You know, how much we can control in a project and how much we need to let go of control so that it can actually get done by staff and by the rest of a team. So let's start with this. Let's start with Tom. How bad are your control issues when it comes to a project, would you say?
I mean, I feel like my control issues have really gotten better over the recent years. Oh gosh,
Sorry.
There's Mark
That's
making
I'm sure that's fine. That was just a malfunction.
loud sounds while I'm talking. I mean, it is something that you have to learn to just let things go. On the creative side of things, but then also on the just sort of like you were describing, just sort of like the trajectory of a project and what's going to end up happening with it, with things that are completely outside your control, like shipping and fulfillment and things like that. Like, so much of that, you just send it into the world and you say, you know, Godspeed, and whatever happens, happens, and then you roll with those punches. I think something that we've done a like really conscious job of over the last couple years here is working together to all growing to accept projects kind of being their own thing. Like, we start the project, but then we get out of its way a little bit and let it be a discovery process where we all learn things about ourselves and the project becomes what it is going to be kind of on its own, instead of us trying to like wrestle it into exactly this image that was in our head when we started. And we find that we have a better experience, we all grow as people, and the projects all end up being better in the long run when we loosen up our grip on it a little bit and just kind of all make and pour into it. And the creativity is more about a mindset and a goal to be productive toward an assumed end, but to not get too precious about exactly what we think it's going to look like or where it's going to go. And then also letting go of our individual pieces. And I think that's probably the hardest part on the whole for each of us, is understanding, like, you know, I had this idea, I saw it this way in my head, this is how I want it to be, but then you involve 6 other people and it's going to change, and accepting that that's okay. Like, that doesn't mean that your voice is no longer in it or it's somehow not as good. It hasn't been diluted by the team. It has just been evolved. And I think taking, I don't know, your pride out of it being exactly like it was in your head and letting you be proud of what we've made as a team
You think
is a growth thing for each of us.
You think personal pride is at the center of a lot of these control issues?
And expression, a desire to bring your specific expression into the world, probably.
Mm-hmm. The ratio between passion and micromanagement is an interesting one. I think the more passionate you are about something, the more you kind of see it a certain way in your head, and you kind of want other people to catch that too. It's like, Jared, yeah, I like what you're saying, but, you know, maybe, you know, and I think we all
fit
do
it in my box, please.
Maybe say it my way.
Yeah.
Love, Mark.
What if you did it the right way?
See, Jared, I love what you're doing here, but you haven't given me enough time to redo it in my handwriting.
That's right. That's right. So, and like, to Tom's point, the passion should be shared. If this is a group project and not something you're doing by yourself, you want to make sure that you're not micromanaging it to the point where nobody else is really passionate about it anymore. They'll be like, well, let's just do what Tom said because Tom wants it the way Tom wants it. It doesn't really resonate the way that it can when you do that. And so I think that's something that is slowly learned over time, the more experience you have with those types of things.
Would you agree that the center point of these control issues do come from a place of personal pride as well?
Yeah, personal pride's interesting. There's There's a good pride and a negative pride, right? And I think both are accurate. There's I want this to be the best possible thing that it could be for everybody. I want as many people to relate to it as possible, and I want to enrich their lives with it. And if it's not done perfectly, that won't work. So change that thing, change that thing, change that thing. And really, you're always operating from a limited perspective. So, you have to be patient and you have to be open in order to, I think serve the whole better. Because everybody's got a valuable perspective, even if it's not the same one that you have. And even though somebody has to make the call, somebody's going to be tasked with the authority to make a call about something. And it's like, gosh, well, I would have done it differently. But I think the character that can come out of a person when something shifts and goes against what they were thinking, but they still have enough ownership and they still can maintain enough, dignity to let those things go and still wholeheartedly be part of the project is, I think, what separates things that are good from things that are absolutely breathtaking.
And also complete.
Because
I think sometimes our personal pride can get in the way from us actually getting something done. Because if we try to maintain too much control, we're never going to be able to actually complete something. If we don't include people into our team, and I think some of the biggest things you said there were patience and openness. If we don't bring a team into working on some projects and we don't have the patience to bring them in and to speak our vision correctly and the openness to have them speak into our vision, then it's very difficult to complete anything that matters.
And I think the central thing is going to be different for each person. Like, I don't think it's always going to be pride for everybody. I think for some people it's going to be like there's an insecurity that's being, poked on when someone comes in and takes away your complete ownership of something. Or, I have 7 siblings and I never got a word in edgewise and this feels the same. And now I feel like claustrophobic and smashed again. I think, we're all going to bring a different life experience to what we're trying to do here. And learning to, so our reason for control is going to be different person to person. But I think we all have a very similar challenge in dealing with whatever it is that's driving that control, acknowledging it, and learning to work around it or work through it or evolve past it.
My mom sent me something this week. She's very insightful and she's very intentional about what she shares and what she sends. And so she sent me this thing this week that I think kind of relates to this. And it's basically about how we talk and how we listen. And I think if you look, for example, at, let's say the political discourse currently in our country, or the media, for example, controlling the narrative and the way that those control issues manifest to drown out other voices. And it happens, just broadly with all of us, right? But we talk to be heard. We talk to express our pain and our feelings. We talk to control. We talk with our pens. We talk with our keyboards. But I think one of the things that opens us up to our potential is listening. And that can become a weapon against all kinds of things. It can become a weapon against hatred. It can become a weapon against indifference. It can become a weapon against micromanaging, controlling behaviors. And it's very disarming to have somebody that's willing to listen. And I find it convicting because I'm really not a very good listener. I mean, that might be news to you guys, but yeah, just fight the urge, Tom. I find it convicting, and hopefully that's not why my mom sent it to me, but maybe it was. I'm still being mothered
and open.
Yeah.
She's like, for no reason, here's a bunch of content called listening.
Right, exactly. And I don't know. I was looking over what she sent me and I read it 3 or 4 times and I was just like, this is so powerful right now. It's just poignant right now. And, in the position that I'm in and the things that I'm doing with y'all and others and with my kids and stuff, listening is such a powerful tool. I've really refocused actually, even just this week after, I feel convicted to really just kind of think about how much time I spend listening and just not trying to convey what I'm thinking, but to learn and to be teachable. I think there's wisdom in being teachable. And so I think that's almost serving that up to you, almost like the antidote for control issues is listening and being teachable.
And I think letting things go. Post surgery, I had my heart surgery, and that is, however you want to look at it, it's a very, it makes you aware of your mortality. And something that's become really clear to me, kind of in the lead up to it, but especially after, is the amount that I was trying to control things was unhealthy, because in that I was trying to control things that ultimately don't really matter to me. Sure, there are a bunch of things that any one of us could jump in on at any given point and make it better. We can look at anything in this company or in conversations other people are having where you can jump in there and you can fix it. You can say something they're not thinking of, or, you can take over that job that someone else in your office is doing and do it better than them. And it's but how necessary to the world and to your story as a human being and to the people you love is it for you to kill yourself making everything slightly better because you think you can? Mm-hmm. I'm not going to look back on my life and feel deeply satisfied with boy, I sure made that process at work 5% more efficient by barreling into it and taking it over. That isn't the point of Tom or anyone working anywhere or involved with a group of friends or doing anything. And I think we spend a lot of our lives spending way too much energy and putting way too much stock into these things that ultimately, if we took a couple steps back, we don't really care with the intensity that our behavior suggests we do.
I just imagine Tom diving forward roll into a production meeting. But have you thought? I would like to see you do that.
We would all like to see me do that. I would like to be capable of doing that, and you all would be very amused by how incapable of doing that I am.
It's happening in my head right now.
I know, isn't it great?
Yeah.
Is it more of a floppy roll?
There's spaghetti.
It's just
and
limbs
stuff in my-
and
it's
spaghetti
weird.
everywhere. Where'd that even come from? These are questions you don't want answered.
Jared, I had a question for you, but did you have feedback to what he wanted?
Yeah, sure. I mean, thank you, Tom, for elucidating why it is so important to not seize control. Now, please let me tell you a story where I seized control.
Just tell you a story about how awesome I am.
That's right. Here we go.
So one time I was in a play, and the director wanted all of the set changes to look like magic. They were like, if I can tell that people are moving things, I'm pissed. And so I had to
That's
turn.
exactly what that person sounded like.
Not at all. Not at all. And so I had to, one of my jobs was that I had to sit inside of this tower. And then once the show actually started, the tower would open up into a wall. And so what that meant practically for me was that I had to sit inside of it for half an hour while everybody was coming in and milling about and getting in their seats. I had to be ready half an hour before everybody else to sit inside this tower. And I was stuck in there with someone who was really into Dungeons and Dragons. And I had never really heard about it. I mean, kind of, but didn't really know a lot about it. But figured if I'm going to be stuck in here for weeks with this kid, I might as well let him talk to me about the thing that he cares about the most. And so he explains to me the difference between warlocks and sorcerers and wizards and about, the different sources of all of their magics. And it seems pretty cool. I was a super Harry Potter kid. I would force my younger brother to do Harry Potter duels with me and get mad when he wouldn't, become stunned when I would say Petrificus Totalis at him. I'm like, you're supposed to fall over. Have you not seen the end of the first movie? But so that all culminates in one day I'm randomly at a party, and somebody that is hosting the party I know has dungeon mastered a game of D&D before in the past. And so I'm like, hey, would you be interested in running this game? I would love to play. I've heard about it. Let's give it a try. And he's like, cool. So getting everybody set it up. And then when it comes time to make my character, I'm like, well, I don't know much, but I do know that I want to be one of these characters that has magic and spells and powers. And he goes, cool. I think you should probably be a cleric. And I'm like, but there's a wizard right there. That seems pretty cool. I think I might want to do that. And he goes, no, you're going to be a cleric. because, the party needs a cleric, and you all will die without one, I guess. And I didn't have a good understanding of the magic system of D&D, about the different spells and how it all works. And so I'm like, but he has magic, right? My cleric has magic, so he could do magic stuff. And he goes, yeah, of course. And so I make my character. And the very first thing that I tried to do is we're in the tavern, and I try to, open a cabinet that's like behind the bar with my magic. Now, anybody who's played D&D before probably knows that a cleric generally does not have this ability, but I wanted to because it was my imagination, my freedom, and I wanted to, and was like forced essentially to engage in this creativity that was not my own. And my decision was to become the dungeon master myself and to go and learn and figure out how to do all of it. Switch systems. We started doing Pathfinder, and now we're doing 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons. And so for the past several years, I have been expressing my creative control so that I could give my friends the freedom that I wanted.
As the dungeon master.
Exactly. Because I knew that I wasn't going to be the type that would say no.
You have ascended.
So you're saying you're using control to give other people more control?
Exactly.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Wow. Jared's the best of us.
Well, it's interesting. I mean, I didn't tie it until the end of your story there, but like the reason why I
Bring it home.
It was a long story.
There it is.
the reason why I started my own company was like, I had my degree in broadcasting, and I went and did internships at sports broadcasting studios, and I just couldn't imagine a life where I just had to say exactly what people wanted me to say all the time. And so I've spent 10 years of my career building something that now finally I have the ability to do podcasting and videos and use all my broadcasting skills, but on my own accord about whatever I want.
Do you remember the first time we did the Vindication rules,
how to play a video?
Yeah, and we had it scripted, and you're like, blah, 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 blah. Forget that.
course I remember
Just tell
that.
me the concept, and I'm just going to go.
Yeah. You kept
Her
trying
younger
to-
brother, the actor, shaking in his boots. Forget the script. You wrote a script? I don't care about that.
Yeah, but I mean, like what Mark wrote coming out of my mouth, it just doesn't work the
You
same
know what? Now
way.
that you say it like that,
Yeah.
So now you just say things that people don't want you to say.
No, I mean, sometimes.
we pay you for it,
What?
and we pay you for it.
Here we are. So when is control good?
When Jared does it.
That's right.
When is it important and necessary?
Hand me
When
the
is-
keys.
When is control important and necessary?
I mean, at some point, things need a degree of control or it's just chaos. So I think it's about degrees.
Sometimes you just need an adult to step in the room and get it done. And I will tell you, if there's chaos or there's no direction, somebody needs to step up, take control of a situation, especially if there's danger or safety issues. Somebody needs to step up and get it done. And we'll ask the questions later.
It's like
I
when
think
we're
it's very
designing a
important.
board game and danger and safety issues come up. Someone needs to really
Well,
The
adult
screaming
up.
room? You talking about the screaming room?
my argument is that control is most necessary in keeping something in alignment with the mission. The details can be softened, can be sanded down, but a leader's job, the person in control, the control that they should have the most is bringing things into alignment with the mission. Just simply asking the question over and over and over again, does this best serve the goal of this project? We all agree this is the goal of this project, right?
Yeah, to
So
be aware.
establishing what the goal of a project, a company is, and snapping it back into alignment.
Well, what you're hitting on is very interesting because you're talking about what are you controlling?
What are you controlling?
Are you controlling the tone of the room? Are you controlling how comfortable? Boy, did I just speak words correctly? My brain melted. Controlling.
it did.
Okay. It did melt.
Well, you were speaking it correctly, in my opinion.
Are you controlling the way everyone feels safe to express their own things? Are you controlling the vision that we're all heading in generally the same direction? Or are you controlling the exact execution?
Are you controlling
So there's-
what pixel is where?
Yeah, what are you choosing to control is a very interesting question because I do think that control is valuable. But
and necessary.
what you're controlling is a very interesting question. That's a good point.
One way that I've found to exercise control in a way that's less micromanagey is having intentional checkpoints for things. where, you have a project, you say what it is you're looking for to the people who are going to be doing it, and you say, this is when we're going to have a checkpoint on this. So they can run and do things. And sometimes that does mean that things that are put out to the public might be different than what you had in mind. However, there's a checkpoint in place that says, okay, here's what I've seen of the body of work you've done so far. I love this. I love this. I love this. Let's work on this. I love this. You're doing a great job. Let's keep going. So those intentional checkpoints are much better than having to consistently micromanage a project.
Yeah, quality assurance, quality control is a necessary thing to make sure that you're, creating and producing and fulfilling something that has value.
Absolutely. And quality control is a really important job. And sometimes quality control, or sometimes that mindset can expand to no longer becoming like, how do I shore up this thing so that it is better, versus like, as we all know as creatives, there are a billion different creative decisions that you could make at any moment that are of equal value. Obviously there's a hierarchy, but deciding whether or not their cloak is red or green. Obviously there are potential metaphorical implications if you want to go down that route, but in general, a lot of creative decisions are kind of arbitrary and up to the tastes of the individual person making that decision. And another creative might come along and say, oh, I would have done it slightly differently, but to know that your way would not increase or decrease the value and then not share that is, like, I think the next level of being a creative is to not only see how you would do it differently, but to understand whether or not it would actually bring value and it would be worthwhile to bring up to the other people.
Patience, openness, and restraint even.
Restraint is a good word. The most experienced leaders that I respect the most are the ones who demonstrate the least amount of control, but the most amount of sharing their perspective. Here are some potential pitfalls I see with that. Instead of don't do that, this is a better way, which is a little more controlling. It's a little bit more like sharing. It's a little bit more like listening and then responding.
Because it gives them the chance to respond to those things that you're worried about. Because if you just put the X on it.
This is what to do or this is what not to do is very different than you sharing your opinion and them coming up with a solution to bring it into alignment.
The more data, the better the decision.
So how can we take this conversation and make it a little more applicable for someone who doesn't work on a creative team? So if you are someone who listens to this show, who's working on a game at home, or you have some other project that you're making, which I think constitutes a large body of the people who listen to this show, at least based on the write-ins we get, how does a discussion about control affect that person? So if I'm designing a board game at home, how should I be thinking about the way I'm thinking about myself controlling that project? Any thoughts?
In the context of board games? I thought we were taking it out of that.
That was just an example.
Okay.
Maybe they're writing a book.
I think
So for a creative project.
Yeah.
Then.
I think a big part of it is honing your skills of agility, even like mental agility. Like setting the path ahead of time of exactly what you think is going to happen and exactly how a project is going to end up is fairly crippling. It's important to have a vision and a goal of how something is going to end, but to be open to new information that you're going to get that's going to change the path. Because if you try to just barrel down and take it down the path that you plan ahead of time, you're probably going to fail. But if you have an end goal and you're willing to maneuver yourself to get there, that's a skill that I think even working as an individual creative is what you need to be able to manage a project to fruition.
Yeah, I think that's a great answer.
Adaptability is potent in this space, right? So things are going to come along that are out of your control. You cannot control them. Being able to adapt in those situations is what sometimes keeps companies afloat, keeps families together. Being adaptable and being willing to let your subjectivity go for a greater good, I think could be key in that situation.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any thoughts, Jared? You work on creative projects by yourself at home.
Yeah. I think that an important thing is that you recognize and I've mentioned this a tiny bit in a previous episode, is to be okay with the dissonance between your eyes and your stomach, to use the normal like metaphor with food, where it's like, oh, I thought that I could eat all this, but I actually could not. And, you know, the number of ideas that I have that I am not at this moment capable of executing to the degree that I want them to be, that is innumerable. And so, you know, if I was listening to this podcast, what I would want myself to hear and to say to myself is that the control that you want over your projects is an ever increasing skill and metric, that like as you get better at all of your individual skills, your ability to literally control yourself as a tool, as an instrument, gets better.
You're basically a creative powder keg, just ready to blow. There's just too many ideas, right?
That's
You have to keep that-
accurate.
You have to keep that. Yeah.
Keep me away from open flames.
We were already doing that
All right, before y'all
because you're made
explode,
of flammable flesh.
before y'all explode, I'm going to control the end of this podcast, which is right now. Thank you for sharing your valuable opinions. And I mean it. I'm not being
She looked at you.
sarcastic. All of you, thank
She always
you.
says it in this sad tone.
I know.
Thank you for saying things at
I
us.
Right. Tom.
I enjoy having these conversations. I hope all of you listening are enjoying listening into our conversations. I hope you enjoy our banter and can sense how much we love each other and are annoyed by each other constantly.
But we control it.
But we control it. Restraint, openness,
restraint.
patience.
That's all this is.
That's all it is.
I didn't know there was a difference between annoyance and love.
We would love to have you subscribe to the podcast, share it with a friend who has control issues, and we'll talk about it on the Outpost. We'll see you there.